Hello and welcome to today's episode of Owning Your Menopause. I am so excited for my next guest. She is a highly regarded GP and women's health advocate with a passion for empowering women to take charge of their health and well-being. With over a decade of experience in medicine, she specialises in holistic care, focusing on the unique challenges faced by women throughout their lives, including the menopause transition. As a vocal advocate for increasing menopause awareness and education, she has dedicated her career to breaking down barriers and addressing stigmas surrounding women's health. Her work emphasises the importance of culturally competent care, ensuring that women from all backgrounds feel seen, heard and supported. She is also a public speaker and educator, frequently sharing her expertise on platforms aimed at improving health literacy and encouraging proactive healthcare choices. With a mission to help women thrive during menopause and beyond, she combines evidence-based medicine with practical, compassionate advice. Not only is she all that, I've met her, become an amazing friend. She has so much energy. And actually, as recently, and we're going to talk about that, doing some incredible work in Sierra Leone, which I'm really looking forward to discussing. But please welcome my next guest, Dr. Aziza Sesay.
My goodness. Thank you so much. It always sounds so awkward when I listen to that, but I'm like, who are you talking about? But thank you so much. It's such a sweet summary. I appreciate that. And thanks for everything that you do.
Thank you. And I'm so glad we have tried on numerous occasions, I know, to do this, but you're busy doing incredible things. But I'm going to go back, I guess, to the beginning, because I think what's always really interesting is for people, for listeners to understand why and how are we here and how have you got into this space. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and obviously what has inspired you to this journey to focusing mostly on women's health?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so I've been a GP for over a decade now. I've been a doctor for 15 years, believe it or not, but I'm pretending to be 25 still. So I've always wanted to help people, as cliche as it sounds. I am one of 5 girls, and I've always known that women's health was a big space. It always had a big space in my heart. And knowing about, obviously, the gender health gap and the discrimination and just the lack of awareness, the lack of care, the lack of resources, and just so many women and girls and individuals who are suffering a lot of the times in silence. I just knew that this is something I wanted to bring in the forefront and empower individuals with the knowledge so that we could change their outcomes. Because I often say, when we talk about women's and gynecological health, there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of taboo and embarrassment. And I usually say this line because it's a fact. Women are dying of embarrassment. Women stop living due to embarrassment. And I just want to try and end that and destigmatize things. I have this vulva. I can't find my other one. I think my kids.
I was going to ask you, because I will never forget meeting. I was with you and Nigat, and I was standing there with these two high-regarded GPs, and you passed me a vulva.
I did. This is not the infamous one. This is another one that I have. I think my kids were playing with the other ones. You know, you start them early, right? With the education. My daughter is always like, this is a vulva. And she points at different parts. Anyways, this is a vulva. And so I'm always walking around with it, getting people to shout out the name of the vulva, knowing the difference between the vagina, which is on the inside, versus the vulva. Again, to try and destigmatize women's health and just empower them with the knowledge. Because for too long, because of the shame and stigma, as I say, we have the worst outcomes. And if there's anything that I can do to make a difference, that's what it's about. If it saves one person's life or saves or changes one person's life, impacts them positively. And I feel like, as cliche as that sounds, I've done what I needed to do.
I think it's cliche at all, because I still think I'm of that generation, and I'm certainly, obviously, you know, my parents, and I'm not like a massive generation, but I'm 50 next year. And I remember when I started doing my Instagram lives, I can't remember who it was with, and someone said like vagina or vulva, and I was like, oh my God. And I was like, and so I definitely grew up, we had names, didn't we? For a wee or a fairy or all kinds of this, because it was sort of trying to take, again, I guess hiding the identity of something that we shouldn't be ashamed of.
Yeah.
Do you feel that that the younger girls now that you're working with are having less shame and embarrassment around it? And do you feel that is also then having a knock-on effect to sort of our generation and my generation and above?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you asked me this question. Thank you so much. I'm going to share with you a personal story. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. My daughter, the very first word she knew for vulva was vulva. And then obviously when my son was born, I was changing his nappy. He's like, what's that? I was like, he has a penis, you have a vulva. It's just one of those things. She gets it. She used that terminology. It's always been fine, despite my family's discomfort, because initially they were like, just call it private parts. But I mean, there are many reasons why it's important that we start it early with children, because it makes them comfortable about their own body. They build better relationship about their intimate parts. They're able to describe areas in which they find discomfort or they're having symptoms. And also it protects them from sexual predators. We know that it's a deterrent from sexual predators because they know that, okay, actually this child is body informed and they might tell their adults. But it also means that there's no ambiguity or any confusion, because you have stories of young girls who, try and tell their mom that they're being molested by their uncle, but unfortunately, because they use the term cookie, they don't realize that, oh, actually something inappropriate is happening. If you say vulva, there's no confusion. You know that this person is doing something inappropriate to the child. I know that's a sad story, but it is still a story that happens today. And I'm still a big advocate for, and I raise awareness and tell people we need to use the correct terminology. And I do still get some backlash, often from adults. Oh, it's not cute. Why can't they just say private parts? Why are we? And I'm like, because we are building the shame and stigma from that young. Now, the reason I wanted to share this story in regards to my daughter, she's currently 6 years old, and recently she started saying private parts. And, that surprised me, and I couldn't understand why. And we had a long discussion about it, and she explained that when she said vulva in front of her friends, they all gasped in shock. And they, told her off, essentially. They scolded her and said, you shouldn't use that word. It's a bad word. Say private parts. And because so many of them said that to her, and they're all around 6, 7 years old, she's in year 2, she felt embarrassed and she started saying the words private parts. And I really had to speak to her and explain and go through the whole process again. Like, what do you call your head? What do you call your shoulders? What do you call your knees and toes and all that? And she said, the words. I'm like, yes, just like those words, that's all vulva is. So we're getting there and I'm trying, but it's hard because you still have the generational shame that's being passed on to these younger generations. As far as they're concerned, as far as what they've been told, is that they are bad words. So until we have everyone educated within the society, from the youngins up to the seniors, and have them understand. Every time I've had this discussion, people finally get it. Like the light bulb moment happens, and I have this discussion frequently. But there's one of my favorite quotes is, "You can say something for the millionth time, and it's that time that someone's finally heard it or listened for the first time." So it's just, yeah, I think the education and awareness is so important. Having these discussions, regardless of how people may feel, so that they can at least question that, where does this stigma come from and why are we perpetuating it and how dangerous actually it is. So another example where I've shared the importance of using the correct terminology, this mom sent me a DM on Instagram and said, thank you so much. You know what? I decided to teach my son the correct word for his penis. The next question he asked me was, okay, that's great. So what's the real name of my elbow? So it's these sort of things that we are instilling in the children, which then affects them as they get older. And so they're not comfortable or confident in telling anybody where they're having symptoms. So my daughter was having symptoms in her vulva when we were in the States, and my sister's mother-in-law heard her say the word vulva, and she's like, oh my God, I gotta sit down. Like, that's shock and discomfort, but she got it eventually.
Yeah. But I think that's often as well, right? Because some people don't know their own anatomy. And I know that, again, as some of the work that you've been doing when you go around is obviously that vulva, vagina, the confusion behind all of that. So I think you're right. I think a lot of people sit down because they're like, what is that word? If she said she's got discomfort in her vagina, I think you're kind of, that seems, for some reason, that word seems more acceptable. It's sort of a little bit more.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a funny story, and it's not actually that funny, and I will share it with you and move on. And I obviously have a young child like you, and we used to have a Volvo, and I'm sure you can see where this is going. And we talk about the right anatomy in our house as well. We've moved on from that. And he said, wow, my mummy drives a Volvo. And I was like, well, no, I don't. I drive a Volvo. And then I went on to explain the vulva, is what women have, and a Volvo is the car. Which always does make me chuckle, because I can't wait to tell him that when he's older and kind of.
That's really cute. That's cute. I love that.
I think it's down to people like you, who have helped me, and I'm totally honest about this. find more acceptance in using that terminology. And obviously I work with a lot of women, as you do, in a very different way, in a different field. And one of the things that I do experience, and I know I'm slightly going off topic as I always do, but we will come back to it, is obviously women going through menopause do experience quite a lot of genitourinary issues. And again, I think sadly there's so much taboo around that. And obviously from where I'm coming from, it's a massive barrier to exercise. It then leads to osteoporosis, osteopenia, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, because women are too afraid to go and see somebody about it. Can we just, seeing as we're there, let's touch on a little bit about why that happens and what women can do and the help they can get?
Okay. In terms of the genitourinary syndrome symptoms and all of that. Okay. So
Yeah.
it's about understanding estrogen, okay? So we have all these hormones, and actually the main producer of estrogen, I don't know if this is going to be visual, but I always like pointing at things. That's just something for me. So this is the internal gynecological anatomy, and we have two ovaries, one on either side, and it's the ovaries that release the hormones estrogen, progesterone, and also testosterone, the male sex hormone. We do release a little bit of that. So we also release estrogen a bit from fat cells and then the adrenal glands, which sit on top of the kidneys. But the main releaser of estrogen are our ovaries. And what happens when we are going through menopause, so around the menopause, and then when we pass and go through menopause completely, and we're postmenopausal. Actually, I want to take 2 seconds just explaining those different transitions, because people get confused. So the perimenopause is a time around the menopause. So this is a time before menopause happens, where you're getting sort of fluctuations of hormones happening. And during that phase, you may still experience symptoms of menopause. And often the age range that happens is 45 onwards. However, in some communities, it can start really early, as early as the late 30s, particularly those from South Asian communities, and also people from the Black community, people like me. Now, so that's the perimenopause. That can last between 4 to 8 years, sometimes up to 10 years. And then you have the menopause. And I think because we sort of compound all these terms together, everyone just assumes menopause is everything, when actually menopause is just one day. So it's classed as the day after you've not had a period naturally for 12 consecutive months. Then you're classed as being in menopause. After that day, you're in postmenopause. And actually, women live around 30% of their lives in postmenopause. So often when we think about, oh, my life is over after menopause, nah, you still have a lot of time. It's almost that rediscovery phase, and when a lot of amazing things can still happen. That's all, by the way. But when you've gone through that phase, eventually our ovaries stop releasing the hormone estrogen, and estrogen is the all important overall magical hormone. I love it because it affects every part of our body. It's often seen as just a reproductive hormone, when actually it does a lot. It affects a lot of areas, and we have loads of estrogen receptors all over our body, from our hair to our skin to our ears to our heart and our bowels, and then our vulval area. So if we're talking about genital urinary symptoms, genital meaning genitals, urinary, the urinary symptoms, urinary area, sorry. And if we look at the vulva, all around the vulva, and particularly around the urethral area, so that's the area where the urine comes out. The urethral opening is essentially the opening that connects the tube, which is connected to the bladder, for the urine to come out. And around the urethral opening, as well as around the vaginal opening, we have a lot of estrogen receptors, and it's those receptors that then respond to the estrogen to make the area more plump, more lubricated and soft and just perfect. And unfortunately, when we have the loss of estrogen, we lose all of that. And that inevitably leads to having the discomfort, the irritation, the scarring, the cuts that can happen because the skin is more thinner and it's also friable. And it also leads to the increased risk of having urinary tract infections and so on and so forth. So that is why when women either are in the perimenopause, because remember I say the fluctuation of hormones, or even postmenopause, they have those symptoms that can be extremely debilitating. And because within certain cultures, you just don't talk about that area because of the taboo and the shame and the embarrassment that's associated with it. And also, it's not a big deal because it's just a little bit of itching, right? It's just a bit of irritation. No, it's not a little bit of that. It can be soul destroying, and it can really affect someone living, going out, doing anything socially. And if it does cause recurrence of urinary tract infections, actually that's one of the leading causes of deaths in older women. And something simple as using topical vaginal estrogen could prevent that. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's just having these discussion and raising the awareness about these things happening. And again, if I go personal, if I talk about my own mom, she didn't come forward to tell me about the symptoms that she was experiencing because she was embarrassed. And then when we spoke about it, and I was like, this is something that could be treated quite easily. And she used it, her life has changed. But she just didn't talk about it because her mother didn't talk about it. And then her mother didn't talk about it. It's just not a conversation that's had. And when I say to her, what was your menopause experience like? She's like, I don't really know what to say. I don't even know what you're talking about, because again, the awareness is not there. They just know that after you reach a certain age, you can no longer have children. That's how it's seen, rather than all of the other psychological, physical, and emotional symptoms that are associated with it.
Yeah, and do you know what? It's funny because I talked to my mum about menopause and she never had one. And then when we really deconstruct it, she got divorced from my dad. She was really
Yeah.
angry all the time. She even went on HRT. She was one of the first women to take, obviously, the other forms of HRT, because she did then get breast cancer. So obviously she came off. But I don't think it was that HRT. You know, it's that sort of storm at the time of this.
Yeah.
So it was sort of
Yeah.
not perfect, but, all of that stuff. But it's so funny when you deconstruct, you're like, actually, you did. It's just that it wasn't talked about. And just going back to the symptoms that we've talked about, if a woman is experiencing that, now obviously we know, and we have made leaps and bounds thanks to people in the field, and obviously Menopause Mandate, Diane Danzebrink, everybody campaigning, everybody trying to get awareness out there. With that educational piece, are more GPs now, do you think, aware of that? Because, let's say a woman goes to her GP and she is suffering these symptoms, she might not have worked out yet she's in menopause. GP might not be on their radar. That might just give them a course of antibiotics, and as you say, it becomes recurrent and nothing gets solved. Are we making headway? What are your thoughts on that at the moment?
Okay, I guess it's a controversial conversation. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. If I'm completely honest, I'm fortunate to have always had a passion for women's health and to have had the thirst and the hunger to do more diplomas and enhance my skills and my expertise in the area. But not everyone has that. And if I'm completely honest, in terms of GP rotations, you don't have to do an obs and gynae rotation. Yes, in the exam, they will ask questions related to women's health, but you don't necessarily have to do a rotation on women's health. I was very fortunate that I had a rotation specifically obs and gynae on women's health when I was doing my training. But can you imagine if a doctor's gone through, and it's only recently that they've made women's health education mandatory, even in medical school. That I think is where we're lacking, and it's really sad when you think about the fact that 51% of the population are women, and also majority of the consultations, most people who come to the surgery, and we know this, women come and seek help from doctors more than men. So it's a sad state of affair, but I do believe, because there's so much more noise in terms of menopause, like you say, because of all the brilliant campaigners who have made headway and have pushed for change. And I think also the education to the public, where the public are now able to go forward to their GPs and say, well, actually, could it be this? I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in increasing GP knowledge and awareness, and perhaps there needs to be mandatory training specifically on menopause. A lot of women's and gynecological health, but I definitely menopause, because there's a guarantee that every woman essentially is going to go through that at some point. So it's important that we have that discussion. But on the same token, people say I'm trying to defend my practice, but there are GPs, for instance, who probably have way more expertise than me in terms of diabetes or cardiovascular. I've taken the time to gain expertise in these fields. It's really hard to know everything. But certainly I absolutely agree, and I 100% advocate and push for certain things. Every GP needs to have at least a basis. And if they don't, they need to be comfortable and confident enough to say, actually, here's a colleague actually who has specialist expertise in this, and perhaps you see them. But I always also push and educate anybody who might be listening to this to know that, okay, if you're struggling with one GP, please don't just stay with them. There are often other GPs in the area, and if it's really worst case scenario, change your GP surgery. Always seek a second or a third opinion if you're also. It's worth, when you go on the GP website, just looking at the names, the letters after their names. So often if they have DRCOG, so that stands for the Diploma with the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, or if they have DFSRH, which is a diploma with the Faculty of Sexual Reproductive Health, usually that means that GP might be clued in and will be able to support you in terms of your women's or gynecological health concerns.
Yeah, I mean, it is worrying. I know earlier on you mentioned sort of the gender health gap. And I mean, again, it's such a loaded question. And I think sometimes we think we're making such leaps and bounds, like again, we do with menopause. And then I often find, and I had this conversation with someone earlier, when you have days at Parliament and you go to Parliament, and you often have the same conversation every kind of 3 months. And it's sort of, hang on a minute, we had that 3 months ago and nothing's come back, and it's just, you're just kind of just churning like a machine, you know. It's not laying any foundation, it's just going, which is really frustration. I do want to touch on that because I am passionate about that. Like, if you can surmise in any kind of way, like, why is there such a gender health gap? And obviously when I talk about that, I think it is important as well when we look at some of the statistics about, you know, drugs and trials on HRT, that women sometimes don't even fit into that picture. Like, I do understand, but I don't. Can you help me?
Yeah, $1 million question. We need more women in power, right? I think that will make a difference, and more women who have the financial capacity as well. I saw last year, I don't know if this is still the case now, but the top 10 richest people in the world were all men. So until we have more women making more money, then they can prioritize funding towards that. But the truth of the matter is the health system was created for men, by men, and unfortunately they take the priority in terms of research. We know, and I only found this out last year, that women were only included in research in the States. Even in the UK, we're still not mandated to be included in research until now. But in the States, it was in 1993 that women were included in research. I knew that it was in 1993, but I thought that was worldwide. But that's not the case in the UK yet. Women are still not mandated to be included in research, which is wild when you think about it. And also 1993 wasn't that long ago. In my mind, 1993 is like 10 years ago.
That's not actually that far away.
It's not that far away. So there's that. I think if we look at health equity in general, yes, absolutely, there is a massive gap. And unfortunately, the UK, I think, is the worst of the G20 at the moment in terms of the gap being so wide. But as soon as you add intersectionality, and this is why I'm really passionate about this, it just makes it worse. As soon as you add ethnicity, you add someone who is disabled or has learning difficulty or is neurodivergent or is part of the LGBTQ community, it just makes it that much worse. And I think until we continue to have these conversations that we then force actionable change, it's not going to make a difference. I'm almost a little bit tired of talking about some of the stats. And recently what I've started doing is sharing the stats as a Black woman, you know, like listing 5 different things and getting people in a room to put their fingers down if it relates to them. And most recently when I did it, I did 10 different, you know, staggering disparities and facts that attribute to Black women, right? And no one else in the room was Black. So I was literally the only woman whose hands were like this. And, you know, it was really emotional for me in that situation. I didn't realize how emotive it would be. But I think for everyone in the room who actually, all of them want health equity as well. But it was that staggering realization that it exists. But sometimes it feels like, are we admiring the problem? Do you just like hearing about it? Do you like being shocked about it? Are we glamorizing this problem? I want more actionable change. I want us to make a difference. Yes, we've spoken about these disparities. We've said about, you know, Black women being 5 times more likely to die in childbirth, pregnancy, and the 6 weeks leading up to pregnancy. It's improved now. I think it's about 2 times, almost 2 times. But still, why is there such a wide gap? And we know that the gap is so bad bad for women, but as I say, you add all these intersections, it's a nightmare. I don't know the answer, but I think that it's so important that we have incredible women like yourself and the other campaigners that you mentioned who will not give up, and we will not shut up, because there's no way that this is going to continue for our children. It can't. It just can't. And I cannot wait for the day that, maybe my granddaughter, I hope I could be alive, I don't know, but my granddaughter will say, y'all were embarrassed about saying vulva? That's ridiculous. Or something crazy like that. Like, how could that be the case,
I think that will happen. Do you know what? I do think that will happen because, like, as I said, like, I have a daughter. She's 15. She has no embarrassment at all.
Yeah.
And we'll use all of the the correct words for the anatomy. She's never had a secret word or a private part, because I think coming back to that, and then we will move on. But like you're saying about that abuse or about whatever, about that allowing they do have so much more access to social media, to all of those kinds of things. It's not just protecting them from those situations in real life, it's protecting them from those situations online as well.
Yeah,
I think that's why we have to have, these correct conversations.
absolutely.
As I knew we would totally go everywhere.
Sorry.
No, it's fine, because I could listen to you all day. I love it. Let's come on with a little bit of health and lifestyle, and then I do want to get onto some of your more current work as well. So I mean, we've taken all this into account. We've talked about the awareness, the education. You've given us a little synopsis into sort of how menopause works, perimenopause, menopause. How can women, I guess, with perhaps the lack of information that some women get, and like you, I'm very keen on helping people that don't have access. I feel sometimes like it is a very privileged thing, white privilege perhaps, because we have, as you say, the access to this information. How can we, best prepare any woman, anyone for themselves for the menopause transition, and just hope that this reaches everybody from every socioeconomic group, so that they can understand what they can do to best prepare themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. The very first thing is just having these conversations, right? Removing the shame, the stigma, and taboo associated with it, and knowing that this is just a natural. That's the other thing. Let's not medicalize menopause. It is a natural transition that every woman will go through. So regardless, just as we think about puberty and pregnancy, that's the same way we should look at and talk about menopause. So I think it's very important that we have these candid, frank discussions, and also we prepare ourselves about what could potentially happen. Not scaremonger, but know that it could happen, right? And actually there is a full spectrum in regards to symptoms that people experience. There's some people actually who go through menopause and it's not been that bad for them, luckily. And then you have the extreme cases where it's been so debilitating, it stopped them from living. So I think it's important to be aware that all of these things can happen. And then know what your options are, okay? It's not one size fits all. So yes, absolutely, there's HRT, hormone replacement therapy, and it's literally, it says what it does in the tin. It replaces the hormone, estrogen, that you've lost because you've gone through menopause. And for some women, it's like night and day when they take these treatment, and they come in different forms. So tablet form, they come in patches, they come as a gel, and then obviously there's a topical vaginal estrogen that you put along the vulval vaginal area as well. So it's important to know that those are options for you, and you can try the different ones that work out, see which one works best for you. And then also there are the non-HRT options that are available, and for some people taking antidepressants makes a difference for them. Obviously relating it to menopause, not necessarily depression, because I think what happens sometimes is women who go through perimenopause are lumped and given antidepressants when actually they could have benefited from HRT, because it's not depression, it's depression because of the menopausal symptoms. So it's just being aware that that's an option. But I always like to talk about lifestyle, just like you. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but lifestyle is the most important. Like, let's put it on top of everything else. And in any of these medications that we're talking about, whether it's HRT or non-HRT related medication, you need to ensure that you have the utmost lifestyle. And I always talk about these 5 things. I always talk about these 5 basic things that we all don't really do as much in these days, but it's so simple. One being exercise. Try and move as much as possible. We don't move as much these days. And that often, especially when we talk about menopause, we talk about strength training because we know that that can help with our bones because of the side effects or the long-term complications that are associated with menopause. Estrogen helps with bone remodeling. So when we lose it, we do get thinner bones. But when you do muscle strengthening exercises, that can help. Also, so the recommendation by NICE is that you do at least 150 minutes over the course of the week. So some people do 30 minutes over 5 days or something like that. Just do something. Walk, brisk walk, get something to get your heart racing. Also, try your best to maintain a healthy weight. I appreciate this can be hard in menopause, but because actually the fat distribution changes, our metabolism slows down, and all of that is to do with the hormonal changes. But where we can, whether it's adjusting our diets to try and accommodate for this so that we maintain that healthy weight, because we know in the long term, obesity is associated with loads of diseases, cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and so on and so forth. The third thing is not smoking. Please don't smoke. If you do smoke, try stop if you can. There's literally no benefit. And I'm talking about vaping as well, because there's definitely been a rise in vaping as a better alternative, but actually it's coming out now that may be worse than smoking. That, and then alcohol. So depending on who you talk to, there's some people who would actually stress that it's better to avoid it completely because that can help with helping with sleep, hot flushes symptoms, and so on. So either you could follow the recommendation that you don't have more than 14 units over the course of the week, not 14 units in a weekend, but over the course of the week. That's something to consider as well. And then the fruits and vegetables. Have your fruits and vegetables. Have your vitamin D supplements. We're in the UK. We're barely getting any sunlight ever. So just take your vitamin D supplements. The recommendation usually is 10 micrograms over the course of the year if you can, specifically between sort of September and March. But I would just recommend taking it anyways because it's good for our bones. Have more calcium containing foods. So yogurt, milk, and so on. If you're not lactose intolerant, you can tolerate that. Some people, because of the drop in estrogen, they have foods that are high in phytoestrogens. So the foods that mimic estrogen. So that includes soy and I believe certain beans and things like that. What else is there in terms of lifestyle? I mean, those are the main things I would say. And then just the natural things that you can do. If you are having hot flushes, have a fan, carry a fan with you. They have these cute little ones. I've seen a lot of women carry around and exactly, they're rechargeable ones that you can carry around. That might be helpful. Wearing lighter clothing. You don't need to buy a menopause vest for an extortionate price.
That menopause washing. Come to this shop and buy a menopause top. No, it's okay.
Honestly, and you know what? There are some menopause can also affect our skin and makes our skin dry. You don't need to buy any fancy menopause creams and lotion. I went to a lecture and this dermatologist decided to check like the ingredients of menopause products versus they're the same, but one is 5 pounds and the other is 50. Do you know what I mean? So be very, very careful. This is where being informed and knowing these things, having discussions about these things, and being kind enough to share it with someone. I always say if there's anything that you learn whenever you listen to these sort of podcasts, or if someone shared something with you that's accurate and true, always check the credentials of those who you're getting advice from. But it's important that you share it with one person who can share with another person who will share it with someone else, and we create this ripple wave effect of knowledge that could potentially save someone's life.
Amazing. Thank you. I want to come on to this question because I knew we'd go over a little bit.
Sorry. No, I talk too much.
There was so much to say and we still haven't even got to the nitty-gritty part that I want to talk about as well. But I do want to touch on this because, again, I think it's important and it's something I know you're passionate about, and you have touched on it briefly. But I do want to talk about the sort of the menopause when it's different across. I mean, I suppose probably why is a silly question. I think we kind of have touched on that with some of that gender health cap and obviously the inequalities that kind of come from all of this. Yeah, how does menopause awareness differ across cultures, and what can we learn from these differences? And are there any cultural stigmas around menopause that you want to address today?
Yeah, okay. I mean, it depends on the community. So we know that there are cultural nuances, religious nuances, and this is just dependent on where the person grew up and who they grew up around. And for instance, I'm a Black African woman, but obviously my knowledge and my inhibitions are very different to my mom's. So depending on, say, for instance, the religion of the person. So I'm Muslim. Islam can be quite a conservative religion, and we don't necessarily talk about certain topics out loud. And I think some of the culture has gone into that as well. And for instance, when I speak about my mom and speak about menopause and her lack of awareness about menopause, she didn't know the symptoms because we don't speak about it. It's just one of those unspoken things. But at the same time, there's also the cultural ideology that it's just something that we get on with. Whether you're suffering, whether it's stopping you from living, it is just the plight that women have to go through. And there's a lot of that within many communities where it's like, well, it's not that big of a deal. My grandmother's gone through it. And it was interesting because I had a conversation with a relative recently, and she's like, I feel like they're making menopause a bigger deal than it is. Why can't we just get on with it? And I was like, but there's treatment. Why should we just get on with it? There are things that can help. I mean, yes, lifestyle is there, but if lifestyle isn't helping and there are actual treatments available, why aren't we using it, utilizing it? And it's just having those conversations and normalizing the use of additional things that can help. But there's also a lot of misinformation and disinformation when it comes to HRT. And I mean, obviously, over 20 years ago, when the research came out and the link between cancer and HRT, I'm not gonna lie, even me as a GP, I used to be nervous about it based on what we were taught. So it's gonna take a lot of unlearning in terms of accepting treatment. And yeah, again, a lot of the cases when we talk about Africans or Black women specifically, I know within my community, many of them don't want to take treatment. They'd rather do the natural remedies. And I think, again, this is where cultural awareness is really important, or cultural competency is really important within GP. So you know that she's not necessarily being resistant. This is all she knows. Just take that extra time to explain how things work. So there's all these things that come into play. There's also the negative association with menopause. So often in the patriarchal society, there's that thought process that a woman's only valuable if she has children. And as soon as she's barren, I hate that terminology, but essentially that's what they call women who've gone through menopause. They're done. They have no use in life. And that ideology has stuck with a lot of generations and a lot of women within these communities. And just also the lack of the word. My mom didn't know what menopause was and what it meant. And there is no word in Creole really for menopause. It's just like she's not able to have babies. That's how it's seen rather than the whole picture of menopause in general. And I think all of these definitely have a role. But also I think the lack of awareness as well in healthcare professionals, because there are some individuals who are around my age in their late 30s who are going to their GPs as either Black or Asian, South Asian women. I'm saying I'm having all these symptoms. Could it be menopause? And they're being told, no, it's not. Or they're having blood tests done and their levels are within the normal range and they're being told that it's not. When actually, if you're in perimenopause, we know that the hormones fluctuate. And if they do it at a certain point when your hormones are high, they'll assume that actually you're fine. Do you know what I mean? Sorry, not that. If the FSH is low, then they'll think that the FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone, and that's the blood test that we usually do to confirm menopause. And if you've gone through menopause, the level is high. But the thing is, when you're in perimenopause, there will be points where it might be low, and it's just because you've not fully, your ovaries have not fully stopped functioning as yet. So it's also important that we educate healthcare professionals about the fact that though the average age of menopause is 51, that's not the case for all ethnicities. We know through the SWAN studies that it could be between, I believe, 6 months to 2 years younger for Black women and even younger for Asian women. And that's not unusual. It's just one of those things. And again, you've said it already. We need more research, desperately need more research and more understanding as to why this is the case. We need more women's health research, but we definitely need more research that tackles the intersectionalities that exist.
Yeah, and you're doing amazing work, and that does bring me on, and then I will come to my final question. But I know recently on Instagram, and I think this does play in nicely because we've talked so much about that awareness and that education and reaching different communities. I was looking at your reel recently of you in Sierra Leone. I'm always getting emotional about it.
Really?
Incredible thing to do at a school with loads of girls, and you're breaking down obviously these taboos, which not only help them as young women feel confident,
Yeah.
but that they will hopefully have a better menopause transition as well, because
Yeah.
they won't feel ashamed. Can you talk
Yeah.
a little bit about that work? Because I think it's really important to mention.
Oh, thank you so much. You're gonna make me emotional. No, it was definitely one of the most wholesome experiences that I've had. I'm very big advocate. I'm a very big advocate of educating young, because they are the next generation. They are our future, and we need to empower them with the right tools from young. And I mean, I knew I was gonna go to Sierra Leone, and I just thought I'm not going to Sierra Leone without doing something with a school. Keep It Facts is a charity that my cousin actually founded over 10 years ago. And it basically gives 10 girls within the school opportunities in terms of education. They pay for the tuition fees, pay for some of their uniform fees and food and all of that to remove that barrier to education, because unfortunately that is a massive barrier, particularly for girls in Sierra Leone. And because of desperation, they go and they are exploited by men. That is a fact, unfortunately. Now, I knew I was going to do something with him, and I said, look, let's do a menstrual workshop, and I could tell them about the anatomy, I could empower them about periods and so on and so forth. And then I thought, it would be great to get some pads. So then I reached out to Manjeet, who is the founder of Binti Period, because she's done a lot of period stuff in period works in India, as well as, I believe, Gambia. So when I reached out to her, she's like, you could just get them to hand make some pads. So that's a skill that they'll learn. I was like, oh, this is great. Let's do that. So that's exactly what we did. We set up a time over 2.5 to 3 hours where I went to the girls. I first presented to them. We spoke about gynae anatomy. We dispelled and tried to destigmatize, we'll get them to use the correct words and destigmatize the whole female anatomy, just to reassure them that it's fine, it's normal. Let's talk about these things. We also spoke about periods, what's normal, what's not normal. And I think what was really great was that they felt so comfortable to the point that they were asking me questions about their own periods, and just that realization that, oh, okay, if it's heavy and not painful, it's not normal. Because unfortunately, there's that intergenerational ideology that heavy, painful periods just run in the family, when actually there could be a underlying condition that runs in the family, and actually that's why they're all suffering. I felt it was very important that we don't just hand pads to them, because I knew that it's not going to last long. Obviously, the disposable pads, which we know in the long term, it takes 500 years for one to degrade. I thought, and at the moment in Sierra Leone, again, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in my country, my home country, but recycling is not that big, and there's an issue with getting rid of trash and all of that. So I just thought it would be better if we had something that was reusable and something that they could learn on the spot by themselves, which they got really stuck in. I loved it. And then once they've learned, because we gave them workbooks to practice at home, then hopefully they could teach someone else. And through that, we have more people gaining that independence and those skills to have their own. I mean, we're hoping that we can eventually build so that the inner liner is more absorbent, because we build it up, right? We just need more resources, more material, and that way that they could use it for a longer period of time, and also they have that long-term protection. But I think for me, what was so wholesome about it was that, one, they were really engrossed, and they were so grateful, and they learned life skill, and they finally, hopefully, destigmatized periods, as well as that natural process that every woman will go through at some point in their life, and they don't need to suffer, and they definitely don't need to suffer in silence if they're struggling.
Are they at a school where there are only girls, or are there boys as well? Like, what was so I just wonder how that then plays out which again is just me like totally forward thinking, because I know it's a long way off, but how that plays out into then the wider society, because
Yeah.
it's much easier when when it's all girls, because then you haven't got the boys.
Yeah.
You might make it awkward.
Yeah.
How does that then roll out so that men make them feel comfortable and it becomes acceptable?
Yeah, no, I agree. Everything is at a snail's pace. You start slowly, right?
It's progress.
It is a girls, sorry?
It's progress.
It is progress, yeah. It's a girls' school, but I agree with you, and I'm a big advocate for boys learning about this, and they learn about it early because I don't think we should separate them. But I feel like that's even in the UK, that's still something that they're trying to build on in the UK. So it's going to take a little bit of time to normalize that in Sierra Leone. But I absolutely agree. And I think it would be cute for the boys to learn how to sew pads, because here's the truth. My dad is the one who spoke to me when I had my first period, because my mom wasn't home at the time. She was out of the country. And though it was really awkward, he did the best he could do. But that's a situation that can happen to anybody. And I tell my husband this all the time. I'm like, you will have to understand and learn enough about periods to have the conversation with our daughter, once she's going through it, without there being any, sorry, what's the word?
Any time.
Awkwardness. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we're free in this house. I think my husband only last week went to buy Tampax or Paz for my daughter, and actually he came back, she was like, Dad, what are these? They're like, so like, off he drops, back he goes. So I think that's great. We're gonna, I mean, look, I said, I won't take up much of your time. If there was one piece of advice that you could give every woman about menopause, what would it be?
Ooh, I think I would want to break the narrative that menopause is the end of your life, because I feel that's especially within my community, that is the mindset that after you've reached that age, you're done. So I'd like to break that. And from what I've seen from incredible women like you and others who have gone through menopause, I just see the richness and the beauty in what you've built and what you continue to build past this stage. I just want more women to believe that, because as someone who will go through it at some point, I don't want to have that in my mind that, oh my God, I'm going to get to an age where it's over. It's not. But I also want them to know that they can seek help and it's okay. And it doesn't mean that they're failing or that they've done anything wrong or that they're less than. It's just human nature. When I gave birth to my daughter, I had an epidural, and my mom's immediate reaction was, oh, you're so scared of pain, you couldn't hack it. And it was like a little bit of a joke.
Yeah.
And, I had to tell her, Mommy, that's not really fair. And actually, there's that option. Why should I endure it? Like, I'm not going to win a prize or anything like that. And I think let's have those conversations where we normalize accepting available treatment, because we don't have to keep enduring pain. We don't, just because we're women. No.
I love that. I literally love that. You've given me goosebumps. And you're right, we don't have to. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Can you just tell those that are listening, I'm sure they follow you, but if they don't, where can they get all this amazing information that you share?
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me this space. Yeah, Talks with Dr. Sesay. That's me on all platforms, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. And then if you want to contact me on my website, it's www.talkswithdrsesay.com or info@talkswithdrsesay.com.
Amazing. And we will share all of those links. We'll ask you to collaborate. But it's just left me say thank you so much for your time. You are incredible. Thank you.
You are. Thank you.